Today we're going to show you how to make an animation out of any photograph using Photoshop and After Effects. Hey there and welcome to PHLEARN. My name is Aaron Nace. We have an awesome tutorial for today. We're going to show you how to animate any photograph. Now in this case, we're going to be making flower petals actually falling through the scene. So we're going to show you how to select those flower petals, duplicate them, and then animate them in After Effects. It's a two-part tutorial. We're gonna go ahead and start off in Photoshop. Let's get into it. So here we are in Photoshop. Now I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in to our subject. What I wanna do is I wanna make sure some of these flower petals are falling like in front of my subject here, and I wanna make sure that some are falling behind my subject. So the first thing we're gonna do, let's go to our background layer, and you guys can actually download this sample image and follow along. Let's go to our background layer. We're gonna go to select subject right here in the contextual taskbar. There we go. It's gonna select out our subject, and we're just gonna go ahead right to the background layer. And you know what? I'm just gonna make sure that this area is selected here. You can see it didn't select that. Let's hit L for the lasso tool, and I'm gonna hold Shift and kind of click and make sure all that area is selected as well. So we just wanna make sure, mostly just my subject's head is what we want. Okay, so now that that's selected, let's go to our background layer. We're gonna hit Control or Command J, and that's gonna duplicate that. Let's just double click and call this subject. Perfect. So we have our background I can turn off, and we have our subject. Now, next thing we wanna do is go ahead and cut out some of our flower petals. So let's go ahead and zoom in. Again, I want them to fall, like some of them in front of my subject's face, some of them behind my subject's face. So we're just gonna go to our background layer, and I'm gonna make selections around a few of these. So let's go ahead. We're just gonna do this. I'm just using my lasso tool and selecting just on the inside of the flower petal. We wanna make sure we don't select any of the background. There we go. That looks pretty good. Hit Control or Command J. Let's go ahead and select another one of these. There we go, just with our lasso tool. Fantastic. Doesn't have to be perfect. You can see mine is not perfect. Hit Control or Command J on that one as well. And we'll just select out another one of these. Also, fantastic. Background, Control or Command J. And let's do one more. Here we go. I like to look at this one here. Just kind of come around, just so we have some variability in the flower petals. Fantastic. And Control or Command J. So here we have our flower petals. Now, if I just make our background invisible, okay, I'll make our subject invisible. You can see we have 4 different flower petals at this point. Now, you can do these each animated individually if you'd like, but in my experience, because I want a lot of flower petals kind of falling around, what we're gonna do is actually show you how to just animate a few of them at the same time. It's gonna make much less work. Okay, so we have all those 4. Now I'm just gonna start separating them around a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and select my layers with the flower petals on them, and we're just gonna start to move those around a little bit. So let's just go ahead and put these here. There we go, that looks pretty good. And right about there. Okay, so we have our flower petals. I'm gonna hit Control or Command G to group all those together. Okay, and then let's hit Control or Command E. That's just gonna merge that entire group. So we have, there we go. Just double click that and call that flower petals. And there we go, perfect. So we have our background layer, we have some flower petals, and let's just go ahead and put those above our subject. So you can see I can kind of move these around, and we'll get a preview of what our animation looks like. So like I'm kind of moving these around through the scene. So I'm gonna make this flower petals, and we'll just call this 01. There we go. I'm gonna hit Control or Command J on that layer. Okay, and let's put some right over here. Control or Command J, put some right over here. Just to kind of show you guys what we're doing, let's just make a solid color layer, and we'll just make that black, okay? Because basically, let's hit Control or Command T, kind of rotate that around. I want a couple of these layers to just have like a lot of flower petals on them. It's just gonna make my job way easier when I come to animate. There we go. Because in After Effects, like you could do every single one of these flower petals on the same exact layer if you wanted to. It would just take a long time. There we go. So I'm just kind of like you know, all this can be in one animation layer in After Effects. It's just gonna save me a ton of time. There we go. So you can see I've got all of those flower petals on one layer. There we go. Let's go ahead and grab that one and move that around. Where's that one? Sometimes it can, there we go. That looks pretty good. So all those are on the same layer. I just made this black background so you guys could kind of see what's going on. Let's go ahead and shift click all of those, okay? And hit Control or Command E on that. and I'll just call this flower petals 02. All right, there we go. And then we have some flower petals 01, as you can see. Let's just kind of show you this. Flower petals 01, this is just like one small cluster of flower petals here. Just move it to the center. And then flower petals 02, this is just gonna be a bunch of them. Now let's hit Controller Command J on that as well. We're gonna do flower petals 02, and then we're gonna call this blur. We're gonna go to filter, blur, and then Gaussian blur. There we go, right over here to Gaussian blur. And I'm just gonna give these a big blur, and then you can see they kind of are barely visible. So if that happens where they're barely visible, just hit Controller Command J a few times, and it's just gonna kind of duplicate those, and I can just shift click all those layers and hit Controller Command E to merge them all together again. All right, flower petals blur. So this will be like, you know, some of them might be coming closer towards the camera. All right, so flower petals 02, flower petals 01, and then flower petals blur. All right, that looks pretty good. And then I want to do like maybe a smaller cluster of blurred flowers. So let's hit L for our lasso tool, go to our background, and there we go. Just get like a big old chunk of flower petals. Hit Controller Command J. There we go. And then let's just do filter, blur, and then Gaussian blur. We just want to do as much like blur and setup and everything like that in, there we go, in Photoshop before we get into After Effects, because it just handles all these effects a lot better in Photoshop. Okay, cool. So we'll just call this flower petals 01. There we go. Let's just change the name. Flower petals 01 blur. Fantastic. All right, so we're pretty well set up now. We have all of our flower petals. We're ready. This color fill layer, we don't need this. I was just only made it visible so we can kind of see what we're doing. So let's go ahead and just delete that. We've got our subject and we've got our background. So you can see some of these I'll be able to put in front of my subject. Some of them will be behind my subject. Pretty cool. Now, all of this is looking really good. I'm ready to get this into After Effects. So the next step is just to save this as a PSD, because we can actually import a PSD directly into After Effects, which is super cool. So let's just go to File, where you're gonna go down here to Save As. There we go. And then we're just gonna go ahead and put this in the right place. There we go, sample PSD, flower animation.psd. You guys are gonna be able to download this PSD exactly like how it is. So let's go ahead and hit save there. Fantastic. Now we're ready to jump into After Effects. So let's open up After Effects. Here we are in a new project. We're gonna go to File. Let's go down to Import, over to File. So we're just gonna import a file and just go directly to the flower animation.psd. You can see it's the same one we just made. All right, and you can download that. Let's hit OK, and it's gonna say import, composition, retain layer sizes, perfect, editable layer styles, OK. Fantastic. So now we have our flower composition.psd. Let's go ahead and expand this out a little bit so we can see what everything is called. We have our background, we have our flower petals at one, you know what, we're just gonna expand this out even more. There we go, so I can just read everything. So we can see petals 01 blur, petals 01, petals 02 blur, petals 02 flower, and then we have our subject. Okay, let's go ahead and start off with our background. So we're just gonna click on our background and we're gonna drag it down here into our timeline. Fantastic. So we have our timeline here, as we can see. Everything looks really good. The next thing I want to do is grab my subject. And because we just imported the PSD, like literally all my layers from the PSD are available to me. Really cool. Okay, so now here with our subject, let's just go ahead and take our subject and put that directly above my animation, or above my background. Now I'm gonna hold spacebar and kind of move around here my composition. You can see my subject isn't in the exact same place. So what we're gonna do, we're just gonna open up our alignment, okay? So let's go to Window and then down to Align. There we go, it's just gonna open up here on the very bottom. You can see Align layers to composition, and we're, layers to composition. We're just gonna put this here in the center. There we go, and then click on the bottom, and then you're gonna see perfectly aligned with the rest. I'll just turn this off and on, and we can see the subject's in the exact right place, which is looking good. Let's go ahead and resize this so we can see. Okay, so we have our background and we have our subject looking good. The next thing we're gonna do, let's go ahead and bring in flower petals 01. Let's just click and drag that right here above our subject. So we have our flower petals 01. These are gonna be coming in front of our subject. Okay, let's go ahead and do flower petals 02. There we go. We'll put that one in. This can go in front of our subject too. And then let's just go ahead and bring that up. Fantastic. So we have our background, our subject, and then a couple of different flower petals. Now, again, some of these I want to be in front of my subject. Some of these I want to be behind my subject, right? So let's go ahead and take these two layers, okay? Let's just expand out the name so we can see what we're doing. Flower petals 01, flower petals 02. I'm gonna hit Controller Command C to copy those. And then we're just gonna click here on our background layer and hit Controller Command V, and it's gonna paste those right there above my background layer. So we have our background, then we have two of the flower petal layers, then we have our subject, then we have the same two layers. So again, same like in Photoshop with a layer order, the background is gonna be in the very back, and then these layers are gonna be behind the subject, and then these layers are gonna be in front of the subject. Okay, so everything is looking really good now. We can go ahead and scale everything. We can just like bring our composition a little bit shorter. There we go, that's looking pretty good. And now it's time to start our animation. Now, at the time being, like if I start to animate one of these things, it might go, I can like bring it over here. It might take a long time. Like if I hit spacebar, we're at like a 2-second composition, 2-second project, which is actually pretty good. If you need to change your project settings, go to composition and then go to your composition settings. There we go. And then your duration here, I recommend about 2 seconds for an animate. We're gonna create an animated GIF. So you can just type in 2 seconds and that'll be perfect. This was already at 2 seconds, so it actually works out really well. All right, so let's go ahead and show you how to animate these. Now, I'm gonna start off with this flower petals 02. That looks really good. Let's go ahead and just scale everything so we can see what we're doing. Now, the first thing we're gonna do, let's click on this little caret here to bring that down, and then the transform. And you can see you can transform position, scale, rotation, opacity, all these kinds of things. Really, really cool. Let's go ahead and just bring this up a little bit so we can see what we're doing a little bit more. Now, the first thing we wanna do is move our position. So we're just gonna take our timeline here, okay, bring that to the very beginning, okay? And then we're just gonna put this right over here and click here on this little stopwatch, boop. When you click there, it creates a keyframe. So you can see it's a keyframe, and then there's a keyframe right here in our animation. Okay, now we're gonna take our slider right over here. I'm just gonna bring it right, not all the way to the very end, but you know, right to almost the very end. We're just gonna click and drag and move this right over here to all the way to this other side, okay? And basically now it's just gonna keyframe from one to another. So if I hit the space bar, let's just hit the space bar. Here we can see, boom, they're just flying right across the screen. Pretty cool. So this is the start of our animation. You can see by making so many flower petals in the same layer, it basically just allows me to save a lot of work. I don't have to animate them individually. If you wanted it to be like perfect and everything moved individually, you could do this layer by layer in After Effects. It would just take a lot longer. Okay, now the next thing I wanna do is right over here, you're gonna see this little icon. It looks like a few little circles here. That's gonna be motion blur. So let's go ahead and turn that on. And then that way, when you go pure animation and hit play, it just has a little bit of motion blur in there, and it's gonna make it look a little bit more realistic. Okay, so that's another thing we wanna do. Now, let's go ahead back here to our first keyframe for the position. We can just move this slider back here, okay? Or you can just go right here where you see position, go all the way over here to the left-hand side, click on this arrow, and that's just gonna bring you to the previous keyframe in your position. Okay, now for this one, I'm gonna give it rotation. So let's go ahead and click on rotation. There we go. Now let's go to our last keyframe here in the position. So we'll go to our position, very last keyframe there. And then I'm gonna give it some rotation too. We don't need to go crazy with it. There we go. Let's just go ahead and put it something like that. Looks pretty good. And then maybe my position, I just need to move it a little bit further out. So let's just go ahead and click on our position and move this out there a little bit there. Perfect. All right, and let's see how that looks. So I'm gonna hit the space bar now, and we can see that my, here we go. You can see that the flower petals are rotating. I'll do a little bit more of a rotation so we can kind of see what we're actually working with. There we go, let's just zoom out. You can hit Controller Command minus to zoom out. So with our rotation, you can click on rotation here, You can scale this just like this, and you can even, well, I don't need to scale it. Let's hit undo. You can rotate it here like this. So let's say I wanted even more of a rotation. There we go. If I hit the spacebar, you can see now it really, really rotates. Just kind of bring that in there. All right. So it kind of looks like the wind is actually blowing it. So it's moving across the screen and it's rotating, which is kind of cool. All right. And I think that's actually looking pretty good. So let's go ahead. Now we're just going to go to the flower petals 01, which is just a smaller bit of flower petals. Couple little keyboard shortcuts for you. Earlier, we were opening this up and then going to position and scale and rotation. You can actually hit P for position, you can hit S for scale, and you can hit R for rotation. So let's go here. We're gonna just go back, bring our timeline back to the very first. There we go, back to the very first keyframe. You can just open up this layer, see what it's gonna do him, okay? And then here, you can just click on P, and this is gonna be your position. So I can say, yep, go ahead and lock my position. Start it off there, looking pretty good, okay? And then next, let's just go to our next frame, and then I'll bring my position, we'll just bring it right over there. So now we have, if I hit spacebar, there we go. You're gonna see we have two of these, they're kind of moving. Now, let's say I wanted this one to move, let's hit okay. Let's say I wanted this one to move a little bit faster. I could do that simply by moving where it is in the timeline, okay? So if I hit spacebar here, you can see that now it's gonna move even faster. Let's go ahead and move it even faster. There we go. So you can see that some of these are kind of like flying by a little bit faster, and some of these are going by a little bit slower. So by adding a little bit more variation here, it just kind of makes it look like some are being taken by the wind a little bit faster, some are a little bit slower. Okay, now let's go ahead. I'm gonna just close these down, and this one we're gonna just duplicate. Controller Command C and then Controller Command V. There we go. Let's just open up the position, and you can see we still have the position in the same places. There we go. So this time, there we go. Let's just move it, and it's gonna go right up there. And then this one, here we go. Let's just make sure we click on that keyframe. That one's just gonna go a little slower. So if I hit spacebar, you can see that one's up at the top, and it's just gonna go a little bit slower. All right, I can click on this and hit R, and this is gonna allow me to do a rotation too. All right, so let's just go ahead, and I need to open this up so I can see my position. This is one thing that's a little bit tricky about After Effects. You always have to make sure that your timeline is on the correct keyframe, because if I just went ahead and added rotation here, it would just change the rotation like wherever it was in the timeline. So you wanna go ahead and make sure you're always on the right keyframe, add rotation, go to the last place in the keyframe, and then we'll just add rotation here. There we go. So this time it's gonna really, you can see it's kind of really spinning around there. All right, and then with all these, we just wanna make sure where we put this motion blur, we just wanna make sure that all of these have motion blur on them as well. Okay, so these are all of these in front of my subject. Let's hit the space bar and we can see, yeah, that looks pretty good. It's relatively variable. Like, of course, we could add more flower petals and things like that, but all these are in front of my subject. So let's go ahead and put some of these behind my subject. All right, let's open this up. There we go. We'll go to the very beginning here and click on P for position. There we go. And I'm just gonna bring this right up here. We're gonna take this, well, this way and then bring it over to the right-hand side. All right, let's go over here and add rotation, and then back over to the other side and then add some rotation. There we go. So this is now some crazy stuff. I think I just did the rotation way too much. So let's go ahead and bring the rotation down a little bit more and then go to the position, and we'll just put the position. There we go. Let's put the position. There we go, right over there. So if I hit spacebar, you can see some of these are now flying in behind my subject. You can hit Controller Command plus or minus to zoom in and out of your composition. Hold spacebar, and that's gonna allow you to move around. There we go. And then just hit the spacebar, and then you can see. So some of these are actually flying in behind my subject. Let's just go ahead and turn some of these layers off so you can see just this layer, which is flying behind my subject. There you can see it. Pretty cool, right? So all that's behind my subject. So we cut the subject out in Photoshop first, and then now we're just bringing this in here in After Effects, which looks pretty good. There you can see it as well. If I hit Control or Command plus, you can also double click right here on your composition, and it's just gonna make it full screen temporarily. And that actually looks really good. You know, seeing these behind my subject, I'm happy with that layer. I don't think we have to animate anything more than that. So let's go ahead and bring that in there. This other layer, we can just totally delete that one. We don't need that. I think that just this one is totally fine. Now I can start to turn some of these other layers on in front of our subject too. There we go. Let's just double click right here where it says composition. There we go. Double click on that. And that's going to bring everything right there in the foreground. Really cool. Now some of these in front of our subject, maybe we want to make these bigger. So let's just go ahead and like this one, Flower Petals 01. Let's go to Flower Petals 02. Let's hit S for scale, and we can just start to scale this up a little bit. See, I'm just scaling that up a little bit. And then now some of these are going to be larger. So let's just double click right here on composition again, and we can see how this looks. I think that's looking even better. It's just ending. If I hit spacebar, it's ending with some of it still visible. Okay, so because we increase the scale, let's just zoom out a little bit. Because we increase the scale, let's hit P for the position. Let's just go all the way to the end. There we go. And click right here. Fantastic. You can see that, I know it's a little confusing. We have all these boxes basically, but I click on position here, okay? And then we click on the keyframe that we want, and then that's this bounding box right here, okay? That's what that is. So then I can click here and bring it over there just to make sure that it's gonna not still be in the frame when our animation ends. We just have to bring it all the way to the outside. That's the important part. You want it to start from the left-hand side out of the frame and end on the right-hand side out of the frame. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's just double click here again on composition, Command plus a couple times. There we go. And then hit spacebar, maybe Command minus a little bit. All right, that's looking pretty good, right? All these flower petals, some of them behind our subject, some of them in front of our subject. I like this animation so far. So let's double click here on composition again. Now, remember we created some of these blur layer 2s, okay? So let's just do this Flower Petals 02 blur. This is gonna be clicking, drag that. That's gonna be right in front of our subject because it's closer to the camera, right? So it's gotta be in front of our subject. Okay, so let's go ahead to the first position keyframe. I'm just gonna grab it from another layer. There we go. Let's open this up and open this up. There we go. Position, we're going to just add a position frame. Controller Command minus to zoom out. There we go. Let's just bring that over there. And then we'll just go right about to the very end. And then bring this over here. And then, you know what? Let's go to the very beginning again, add a rotation, go to the end, and then add a rotation here as well. And then on our position, we just need to move this right over here. All right, so let's see how that looks. So we should have some blur now. And you know what? Let's go ahead and scale this up as well. Why not, right? There we go. Let's see how it ends. Just go to the end of the position and just go ahead and go to our position slider, position keyframe rather, and move this over here too. Okay, let's see how that looks. Remember, this is just blurred flower petals that are right in front of our subject, okay? So let's click here, hit the space bar, and then we've got some blur. You know, for these, I might inverse the way that the rotation is going because it kind of looks like it's basically just doing the same thing, doesn't it? Okay, so let's double click right here where it says composition again. Okay, for our rotation, instead of plus 66, let's just go to like a negative. There we go, and then hit play. There we go, that's looking a little bit better. All right, let's go to our composition, double click there on our composition and hit spacebar. And here we have our animation. So some of these are blurred in front of our subject, some of them are behind our subject. Everything's looking pretty good. You can see it loops perfectly. Because it's an animated GIF, like it has to have a start and an end that's exactly the same. So that's why the flowers go from one side to the other and then stop a little bit and then go from one side to the other and stop a little bit. Of course, you could create a longer animation if you wanted to, and if you didn't want to create a looping animated GIF, you could have an effect where it just looked like many different flower petals are going across the screen over a period of time if you didn't need it to loop. But in this case, because we do need it to loop, it basically has to start and end with no flower petals, and then the middle of the animation, you got flower petals. But still, really cool effect. You can do this with so many different things. You just want to move across your screen. Okay, so now it's time to export. Let's just double click right here on composition again, hit our spacebar. I think this is looking fantastic. And we did so much of this in Photoshop, which is so cool. So now we're gonna go to File, we're gonna go down to where it says Export, and we're gonna go to Add to Adobe Media Encoder Queue. So we wanna use the media encoder because this is gonna allow us to encode this as an animated GIF. So here we are in Adobe Media Encoder. Now our project just showed up here. We have our little drop-down menu here. You can choose to export this as many different file formats, including like MP4. We're gonna go ahead all the way to the top to an animated GIF. Perfect. Now here in our settings, we're just going to put animated GIF with transparency, match the source. That looks fantastic. And then here you just wanna go ahead and click and make sure you put it in the right place. I went ahead and put it in my animated GIF folder. So we're gonna hit save there. Then all you have to do right up here at the very top is hit this play button, and it's gonna start the queue, and you can see right down here on the bottom, it's rendering out our project, and in just a few seconds, we're going to have an animated GIF on our computer. So it's completely done. Let's just go into our Finder menu. There we go. Let's go into our tutorial where I just put this. It's gonna be in your download. You guys can download this and hit the space bar there, and you can see, in fact, we have an animated GIF looking really good. Fantastic, done in Photoshop and then into After Effects. Now, the only thing I'll say at the end of this is that our file size is a little bit large. We have our images 87 megabytes, which is pretty large for putting this on the internet. So I would recommend using an online tool like easygif.com or any type of GIF conversion that's basically gonna allow you to compress the file size, maybe make the image a little bit smaller and compress it so you can load it up to the web. And down below, we're gonna list a couple of our favorite websites for compressing those GIFs. You just upload them, hit compress, and you're good to go. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed this video. You can take any photograph, take an element from it, cut it out, copy, paste it, and then move it with After Effects to create your beautiful animation. Thanks again for watching. Give us a big thumbs up if you enjoyed this. I'll learn you later. Bye, everyone.